So, I'm sitting here at my desk, looking out over the plant, and I just got off the phone with a local newspaper reporter. She was asking about what she called the $716 coffee run. And yeah, that's not a typo. $716 for a cup of coffee. You might be thinking, what in the world could make coffee that expensive? Well, it's not about the coffee itself, at least not entirely. It's a story about a bad boss, a union contract, and the day I decided I'd had enough. Honestly, it wasn't the coffee that got to me, not really. It was the principle. The blatant disrespect. 17 years I'd poured into Cascade Industrial Manufacturing since I was 22, right out of community college. Started as a junior technician, worked my way up, nights, weekends, fixing everything nobody else could touch. Our facility is just outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We make precision components for aerospace contractors. We're talking tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. One tiny screw-up, and a multi-million-dollar contract is gone. For the last 8 years, I was the guy. The one they called at 3 in the morning when a machine started acting possessed. The one who knew the quirks of equipment better than the manuals themselves. I'd trained half the current engineering staff. Saved the company something like $2.3 million last year alone, through process improvements. That number? That's not me bragging. That's HR's figure. They framed it and put it on the wall in the main lobby, right next to the corporate mission statement about excellence and innovation. Our plant runs 3 shifts, 6 days a week. 240 people on the floor, 60 in support. The engineering department? We're the backbone. We handle everything from initial design review to final quality certification. The thing that keeps the contracts coming in and the defects going out. My old boss, Arthur, he retired back in March. He'd run the engineering department for 22 years, knew the plant inside and out, and more importantly, he treated his people right. He understood that engineers aren't interchangeable parts. When he announced his retirement, he pulled me aside, looked me dead in the eye, and told me he'd recommended me for his position. Said I'd earned it. Said the final decision was up to corporate, but he'd done everything he could. I believed him. I figured I had a real shot at that department head role. Not out of entitlement, but because I'd basically been doing half the job anyway, while Arthur handled the corporate politics, the budget meetings, the strategic planning. The stuff that required a title, but not necessarily the deep technical knowledge. Instead, corporate hired from outside. Brought in someone named Charlotte Reed from their Atlanta office. 43 years old, MBA from some impressive university, 0 manufacturing experience, 0 time on a production floor. Her background was in management consulting, strategic operations. Apparently, that qualified her to run an engineering department full of people who'd spent their entire careers actually making things. The announcement email landed on a Tuesday. All the usual corporate platitudes about fresh perspectives and innovative leadership. Arthur forwarded it to me privately with a 2-word message, "Sorry, kiddo." Politics won. I knew what he meant. Corporate loves external hires for management roles. Fresh eyes, no baggage, no loyalties to existing staff. It made a kind of twisted sense, I guess. But it also meant putting someone with absolutely no domain expertise in charge of a highly technical operation. It was like hiring a dentist to run a car dealership because, hey, they both work with drills. Charlotte started the following Monday. Her first day, she called an all-hands meeting in conference room A, showed up 15 minutes late, wearing heels that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. She stood at the front with this practiced smile, the kind that never quite reached her eyes. She talked for 45 minutes straight about synergy, cross-functional optimization, and leveraging core competencies. She used the word streamline 11 times. I counted. Not once did she mention tolerances, or quality control, or the specific challenges of precision manufacturing. Not once did she ask about our current projects, or ongoing concerns, or what the department actually needed from leadership. When she finally finished, she asked if there were any questions. Noah Miller, one of my junior engineers, raised his hand. He asked how she planned to handle the recurring calibration issues with the CNC machines in Annex C. A real question. A practical concern. The kind of thing that directly affects our actual work. Charlotte blinked. Then she smiled wider. Said she looked forward to diving into the details with the team and that she believed in empowering her people to bring solutions to the table. Translation? I have no idea what you're talking about, and I'm not going to admit that in front of everyone. Noah looked at me. I just shrugged. What could I do? She was the boss now. The org chart said so. Her first week was mostly Charlotte setting up her office and scheduling one-on-ones. She decorated her space with motivational posters and abstract art. She even removed Arthur's old technical reference books from the shelves, replacing them with management philosophy bestsellers, the kind with titles about disruption and thinking outside boxes. My one-on-one was Thursday afternoon. I walked in expecting a conversation about the department's priorities, current projects, the stuff that actually matters when you're taking over a complex operation. Instead, she spent 20 minutes telling me about her leadership philosophy. Something about servant leadership and creating a culture of accountability. She drew diagrams on her whiteboard, circles, arrows, words like synergy and alignment. None of it connected to anything real. Then she asked me to describe my role in one sentence. I looked at her. I keep this facility running when things go wrong. She wrote something in her notebook, didn't ask any follow-up questions. Didn't ask what kinds of things went wrong, or how often, or what I'd learned from 17 years of problem solving. Just nodded and said she appreciated my dedication. I left that meeting knowing exactly what kind of boss she was going to be. The kind who mistakes confidence for competence. The kind who thinks managing people is the same as understanding what they actually do. Week 2, that's when things started getting interesting. Charlotte decided she needed to establish her authority. It started small. She changed the meeting schedule without asking anyone's input. Moved the weekly engineering review from Tuesday morning to Friday afternoon. That meant half the team couldn't even attend because they were on the production floor dealing with end-of-week quality checks. I mentioned this to her, explained the conflict, suggested we either move it back or hold 2 sessions. She said she appreciated my feedback, but the new time worked better for her calendar. Her calendar. Not the team's needs. Then she reorganized the shared drive. 18 years of documentation, project files, technical specifications. She moved everything into a new folder structure that only made sense to someone who'd never actually needed to find anything in a hurry. It took me 3 hours to locate the tolerance specs for the Windsor contract because she'd filed them under historical projects instead of active clients. I mentioned this to her politely, suggested maybe we could discuss major changes before implementing them. She smiled that smile again, said she appreciated my feedback, but that sometimes change is uncomfortable, and we need to trust the process. Trust the process. Like finding critical documentation was some kind of personal growth exercise, instead of a job requirement. The next incident happened on a Wednesday. One of our CNC machines in Annex B threw an error code nobody recognized. Standard procedure was to call me. I'd seen every error that machine could produce over the past decade and a half. But Charlotte intercepted the call. Said she wanted to handle it herself. Learn the operation from the ground up. 3 hours later, the machine was still down. Production was backing up. The shift supervisor finally called me directly. I went to Annex B and found Charlotte standing in front of the machine, flipping through the operator's manual like she was looking for a recipe. The error? A thermal sensor misread. Common issue when humidity changes rapidly. Takes about 4 minutes to recalibrate if you know what you're doing. I fixed it. Didn't say anything. Just fixed it and walked away. Charlotte sent me an email later that afternoon. Said she appreciated my assistance, but reminded me that all technical issues should be routed through her office first. The chain of command was important. I forwarded that email to my personal account. Started building a file. Week 3, she went after the coffee machine. This is important context. The engineering department had a proper espresso machine in the break room. Not some cheap drip pot, but an actual commercial-grade machine that Arthur had bought with departmental funds about 6 years ago. He figured if his people were going to work 60-hour weeks during crunch time, the least they deserved was decent coffee. And it worked. Morale stayed high even during the brutal seasons. People bonded over espresso, shared ideas, built the kind of informal relationships that make teams actually function. Charlotte decided the machine was an unnecessary luxury. Said it created inequality because other departments didn't have one. She announced she was having it removed and replaced with a standard Keurig, like everyone else. Nobody said anything in the meeting, but afterward, the break room was full of people just standing there, looking at the espresso machine like it was a fallen soldier. Noah said it best, "This is how it starts. Death by 1,000 cuts." The machine was gone by Monday. The Keurig arrived Tuesday. It made coffee that tasted like sadness and disappointment. One of the maintenance guys, a 30-year veteran named Thomas Johnson, pulled me aside that afternoon. Said he'd moved the espresso machine to a storage closet in Annex B, said he'd keep it maintained until things changed. I told him that was probably unnecessary. He just smiled and said he'd seen a lot of bosses come and go. The good ones stayed, the bad ones didn't. Either way, the coffee machine would be there when things settled down. Week 4. That's when Charlotte made her big move. Thursday morning, I was at my desk reviewing the stress analysis for a landing gear component when she stopped by. That smile already in place. The one that said she was about to ask for something and expected total compliance. "Hey, Michael," she said, "I'm having my first leadership team meeting this afternoon. Directors from sales, operations, finance. Really important for making a good impression. Big opportunity to set the tone for my tenure here. I need someone to handle the coffee and refreshments." I looked up from my screen, processing what she just said, making sure I'd heard it correctly. I'm in the middle of a structural analysis for the Everett contract. It's due tomorrow. She tilted her head. That dismissive gesture that said my concerns were noted but irrelevant. I'm sure it can wait a few hours. This is important. You want me to get coffee and set up the conference room? Make sure everything looks professional? Maybe pick up some pastries from that bakery downtown? First impressions matter with this group. I'm a senior engineer, I said, my voice flat. And I'm your department head, she replied, like she was explaining something to a child. Like the hierarchy should automatically override everything else. We all pitch in around here. That's what teamwork looks like. I sat there for a moment. 17 years at this company. $2.3 million in documented savings last year. 3 patents with my name on them. Trained half the current engineering staff. Saved contracts worth tens of millions. And this woman wanted me to be her caterer. But here's the thing about working in a union shop. We've got rules. Specific rules that management tends to forget about until someone reminds them. Rules that exist precisely because people like Charlotte have existed throughout history, treating skilled workers like servants. Sure, I smiled. I'd be happy to help. Her expression flickered. Surprise, maybe. She'd expected resistance. Expected me to push back so she could assert dominance. No resistance meant she'd won. That's what she thought. Great. Meeting's at 2. Make sure everything's ready by 1:30. Got it. She walked away, looking satisfied. I waited until she was back in her office, then pulled up the union contract on my computer. Article 7, Section 4, Subsection B. I'd read this document cover to cover when I first got hired. Read it again every time contract negotiations came up. Most people skimmed the boring parts. I memorized them. The relevant section covered job classifications and duty assignments. Specifically, it addressed situations where employees were asked to perform duties outside their normal job classification. The language was clear: any employee assigned to perform courier, delivery, or service duties outside their primary job classification shall be compensated at twice the standard hourly rate for all time spent on such duties, including travel time. This provision existed because management had a habit of asking skilled workers to run errands during labor shortages in the 70s. The union negotiated it into the contract to discourage the practice, to make it expensive for companies to misuse their technical staff. Nobody had invoked it in years, but it was still there. Still enforceable. Still legally binding. I printed the relevant page, highlighted the subsection. Then I started planning. If Charlotte wanted coffee, she was going to get coffee. Just not the way she expected. First, I called Fred in the motor pool. Fred had been running fleet operations for over 30 years. Knew every loophole in the vehicle requisition system. Knew how to make official business look official. Need a vehicle for a department errand, I said. Official business. Fred didn't ask questions. That's what I liked about him. What kind of errand? Coffee run. Boss's orders. He chuckled. The new one? Heard she's a piece of work. She has high standards. Fred signed out a company truck to my name. White Ford F-150 with the Cascade logo on the door. Official vehicle. Official business. All documented in the fleet management system with timestamps and authorization codes. Next, I did some research. Charlotte wanted coffee for her important meeting. She hadn't specified where to get it. She hadn't specified a budget. She hadn't specified a timeline beyond ready by 1:30. Those were her mistakes. See, there's a specialty coffee roaster about 2 hours east of Pittsburgh. Place called Redstone Roasters. They roast their own beans on site, sourced directly from small farms in Colombia, Ethiopia, and Guatemala. Their pour-over is considered some of the best in the Mid-Atlantic. I'd been there once for a friend's wedding reception. Knew they did corporate orders with full catering service. I called ahead, explained I needed premium coffee service for an executive meeting. 8 people, afternoon timing, company account. I asked about their catering options. The woman on the phone was incredibly helpful. They could prepare a selection of single-origin pour-overs, provide proper ceramic cups and equipment, and include artisan pastries from their partner bakery. Total cost for the full premium package? $480. Perfect. I gave them the company credit card number, the one Charlotte had issued to me the previous week for departmental supplies. She'd handed it over casually, saying I could use it for anything work-related. Her words, not mine. Then I logged my departure time in the company system, 9:47 a.m. Noted the purpose as procurement of refreshments per department head request. Everything documented. Everything official. Everything traceable. The drive east was pleasant. Late spring in Pennsylvania, green fields, blue sky, minimal traffic on the interstate. I kept the radio on an oldies station and thought about all the ways this could play out. Best case scenario? Charlotte learns that treating skilled employees like servants has consequences. She gets embarrassed in front of her director colleagues. Corporate gets involved. Maybe she thinks twice before pulling something like this again. Worst case? She tries to discipline me. I file a grievance with the union, and we spend the next 6 months in arbitration while the whole company watches her explain why she sent her senior engineer to fetch coffee. Either way, I wasn't losing. Redstone Roasters was everything I remembered. Small building with exposed brick, the smell of fresh roasted beans hitting you the moment you walked in. They had a display case full of pastries that looked like art, croissants, danishes, and something called a kuhneman that I'd never heard of but looked incredible. The owner, a guy named Daniel Hayes, came out personally to help with the order. Third-generation roaster. Knew everything about coffee the way I knew everything about stress tolerances. "You're from Cascade?" he asked while packing the thermal carafes. "We've done corporate events before, but usually it's office managers or executive assistants calling, not engineers." "Special situation," I said. He nodded like he understood. "Some bosses forget who keeps the lights on." Something like that. He showed me the selection. 3 single-origin options with detailed tasting notes. Ethiopian Yirgacheffe with floral undertones. Colombian Huila with chocolate notes. Guatemalan Antigua with a citrus finish. Each carafe held enough for 8 servings. Professional presentation with the Redstone Roasters logo. The pastries were equally impressive. Butter croissants, fruit danishes, chocolate almond biscotti. All made that morning. All arranged on wooden serving boards with branded napkins. "This is a lot of effort for a coffee run," Daniel said, a slight grin playing on his lips. "First impressions matter," I quoted. "That's what my boss said." He gave me a knowing look. "Well, I hope she appreciates it." "I'm sure she will." The drive back took longer. Construction on I-79 added an extra 40 minutes. An accident near exit 99 added another 20. I didn't rush. Kept the thermal carafes secure in the passenger seat. Stopped once for gas and documented the receipt. Took my time at the rest stop. Bought a sandwich. Ate it slowly while watching trucks pass on the highway. I pulled into the Cascade parking lot at 3:23 p.m. Charlotte's meeting had started at 2. I'd been gone for 5 hours and 36 minutes. The truck barely stopped before my phone started buzzing. 3 missed calls from Charlotte. 2 from HR. 1 from Robert Hayes, the operations director. Several text messages ranging from "Where are you?" to "This is unacceptable" to "Call me immediately." I gathered the coffee supplies and walked into the building like nothing was wrong. Badged in. Nodded at security. Took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The conference room was visible through the glass walls as I approached. 8 people sitting around the table, Charlotte at the head, face red, gesturing at something on her laptop screen. The directors looked uncomfortable, the kind of uncomfortable that comes from watching someone melt down in real time. I could see empty water glasses on the table, the standard company coffee pot sitting unused in the corner. They'd been waiting for hours. I knocked on the glass door, held up the Redstone Roasters carafe like a prize. Charlotte's head snapped toward me. For a second, I thought she might actually throw something. Her face went from red to purple. The directors all turned to stare. "Where have you been?" she hissed. "Getting coffee," I said calmly. "Like you asked." I opened the door and started setting up the service station in the corner. Ceramic cups arranged neatly. Pastries on the wooden serving board. 3 different single-origin options with tasting notes printed on small cards. Professional presentation. Exactly what she had asked for. The directors stared. Robert Hayes looked like he was trying not to laugh. Eleanor Green from finance had her hand over her mouth. Charlotte stood up so fast her chair rolled backward and hit the wall. That meeting request was for 1:30. It is almost 3:30. I had to start this meeting with nothing. Do you understand how embarrassing that was? Do you understand how this made me look? "I'm sorry for the inconvenience," I said, keeping my voice even. "I was fulfilling your request to obtain coffee and refreshments." The nearest facility that met professional standards for an executive meeting was located approximately 2 hours east of here. "I prioritized quality, as you requested." Her eyes narrowed. Quality? You could have gone to the Starbucks 5 minutes away. You said you wanted to make a good impression, I countered. You said first impressions matter. I assumed that meant you wanted the best available option, not the most convenient one. Eleanor from finance spoke up from her seat. Actually, these pastries are excellent. Where did you say this place was? Redstone Roasters, I replied. About 2 hours east. They source directly from small farms. Roast everything on site. Charlotte cut in. This is not relevant to the discussion. Robert Hayes leaned back in his chair. I don't know, Charlotte. Seems pretty relevant to me. You asked him to get coffee. He got coffee. Exceptional coffee, from the looks of it. This is insubordination. You deliberately sabotaged my meeting. I set down the last plate, arranged the napkins, made sure everything was perfectly positioned. Then I reached into my back pocket and pulled out the printed union contract page. Actually, I followed your instructions exactly. However, I do want to make you aware of Article 7, Section 4, Subsection B of our collective bargaining agreement. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. It states that any employee assigned courier or service duties outside their primary job classification is entitled to compensation at twice the standard hourly rate, including travel time. I handed her the paper. She looked at it like I'd handed her a live snake. Didn't take it, just stared. My standard hourly rate is $64. I was performing courier duties for 5 hours and 36 minutes. That's $358 at base rate, or $716 at the contractual double-time rate. Additionally, I incurred $480 in refreshment costs, which I charged to the departmental account, as authorized by you. The room was silent. Robert Hayes had stopped pretending not to laugh and was openly grinning. Eleanor Green was taking notes. You charged $700 for coffee? Charlotte's voice had gone shrill. Higher than professional. The kind of voice that makes people look away out of second-hand embarrassment. I obtained premium catering services for an executive meeting as instructed, I stated calmly. I followed proper procurement procedures and documented all expenses. I also ensured that my compensation for performing non-engineering duties was handled according to our legally binding union contract. I paused. Let the silence build. Would you like me to invoice HR directly, or should I submit through the normal timesheet process? Charlotte looked at the other directors. They looked away. Nobody wanted to be associated with this. This is ridiculous. You're not getting double time for a coffee run. That's fine. We can address it through the grievance process. I'm sure the union steward would be interested in reviewing a case where management explicitly assigned courier duties to a classified engineer and then refused contractual compensation. Robert Hayes spoke up. Charlotte, can we take a 5-minute break? I think we should let this get sorted out privately. She nodded stiffly. The directors filed out. A few of them grabbed pastries on the way. One commented quietly that the croissants looked amazing. Another poured himself a cup of the Ethiopian and raised his eyebrows appreciatively. Eleanor stopped to examine the coffee selection. Redstone Roasters. Nice choice. These guys are excellent. I've been to their tasting room. Thanks, I said. Figured if I was making the trip, might as well do it right. Charlotte and I were alone now. She stood behind her chair, gripping the back like she needed something to hold on to. You think you're clever? I think I followed instructions, I replied. You deliberately made me look foolish in front of my peers. You asked a senior engineer to fetch coffee, I said, a slight edge to my voice. The foolishness was built into the request. I just provided documentation. Her jaw tightened. This isn't over. The grievance goes through regardless. That's $716 you owe me. I walked out before she could respond. My union steward, David Sanchez, found me at my desk 20 minutes later. He'd been with Cascade almost as long as I had, knew the contract as well as anyone. Heard you had an interesting afternoon. News travels fast. He sat on the corner of my desk. Fred called me. Said you requisitioned a truck for a coffee run and came back 4 hours later with gourmet espresso. Said it was the best use of company resources he'd seen in years. 5 hours and 36 minutes. David grinned. Article 7, Section 4, Subsection B. You know your contract. That provision hasn't been invoked since 1989. Guy named Peter Morales got sent to pick up dry cleaning for his supervisor. Billed 8 hours of double time because he drove to a cleaner in Erie instead of using the one across the street. Management never assigned personal errands to union members again. Legend. David handed me a form. File this. I'll make sure it gets processed correctly. Also, between us, about 6 other people in the department have approached me about similar incidents. Charlotte's been using engineers as personal assistants since she got here. Having people pick up her lunch, run documents to other buildings. One guy got sent to pick up her dry cleaning 3 times in 2 weeks. You're just the first one to fight back. I filled out the form, signed it, dated it, handed it back. She's going to escalate this, probably. He shrugged. Corporate doesn't like union grievances. Bad for metrics. Bad for executive reviews. The last department head who racked up multiple grievances got quietly transferred to a facility in Nevada in July without air conditioning. The next few weeks were a lesson in Cold War dynamics. Charlotte didn't speak to me directly. Everything came through email, meticulously worded and CC'd to HR. She requested status updates on projects that didn't need updates, asked for documentation on procedures I'd been performing successfully for years, scheduled performance check-ins with vague agendas and ominous subject lines. The first check-in was the Monday after the coffee incident. She had a list of concerns: my attitude, my communication style, my resistance to change. She read them off like she was presenting evidence at a trial. I sat there and let her finish. Then I asked if she had any concerns about my actual work product, the quality of my engineering, the accuracy of my analyses, the effectiveness of my solutions. She paused, said she was focused on behavioral issues at this time. I told her I'd take her feedback under advisement, asked if there was anything else. She said no. I left. That afternoon, I sent her an email summarizing our conversation. CC'd HR, noted that no performance concerns related to engineering quality had been raised. Asked her to confirm the summary was accurate. She never responded, but she also never brought up that meeting again. I responded to everything she sent me on time, in writing, with excessive detail. She wanted a status update on the Everett contract? 14-page report with appendices covering stress analysis methodology, tolerance specifications, supplier communications, and a timeline showing I was ahead of schedule. She wanted documentation on the calibration process for Annex C? Complete procedural manual plus photographs plus comparison analysis with industry standards showing our process exceeded baseline requirements by 18%. Every email ended the same way: please let me know if you need any additional information. I'm happy to provide clarification. Noah started calling it the bureaucratic Aikido approach. Make compliance into a weapon. Meanwhile, Charlotte was struggling with the actual job. First disaster, she approved a vendor change for precision fasteners without consulting anyone. Saved 12% on unit costs. Also resulted in 4 rejected batches because the new fasteners didn't meet aerospace certification requirements. Cost us $90,000 in rework and delayed delivery penalties. Second disaster, she restructured the project management workflow to improve efficiency. Added 3 new approval layers. Increased average project timelines by 11%. Third disaster, she implemented a new performance metric system based on something from a management seminar. Engineers started getting evaluated on criteria that had nothing to do with engineering quality. 2 junior engineers started updating their resumes. One of them, a talented kid named Ethan, who'd been with us 3 years, actually quit. Took a job with a competitor. We lost 2 years of training investment because Charlotte wanted to measure synergy. Fourth disaster, she scheduled a critical client presentation without checking the engineering team's availability. I was in the middle of a compliance audit. Noah was handling a machine failure in Annex C. The presentation happened with no technical staff present. The client asked questions nobody could answer. They walked away with serious concerns about our capabilities. And through all of it, I just kept doing my job. Quietly. Effectively. Documenting everything. The grievance hearing happened 6 weeks after the coffee incident. Standard process. Me, David, Charlotte, an HR representative named Lisa Turner, and a neutral arbitrator from the Union Management Committee. We met in conference room B at 9 in the morning. Same room where Charlotte had announced all her changes. Felt appropriate. The arbitrator was a guy named Mark Jensen, a retired labor lawyer. Done hundreds of these hearings over the years. Had a reputation for being fair but thorough. Charlotte's argument was predictable. I had deliberately misinterpreted her request. A reasonable person would have understood she meant local coffee, not a 4-hour road trip. My actions constituted insubordination and malicious compliance. She brought documentation, emails showing I'd been a difficult employee, performance concerns she'd noted over the previous weeks, a written statement arguing that my behavior was part of a pattern of resistance to her leadership. She even had a timeline showing how long it should have taken to get coffee from nearby vendors. Mark reviewed everything carefully, took notes, asked clarifying questions about the emails. My counterargument was simpler. She assigned a classified engineer to perform courier duties. The contract specifies compensation rates for such assignments. The distance traveled was a direct result of her failure to provide specific parameters. I followed her instructions exactly as given. I brought documentation, too. The union contract with the relevant section highlighted. The fleet requisition form showing official authorization. The credit card receipt showing proper procurement procedures. The time log showing my departure and return times. Plus testimonials from 3 coworkers about similar errand requests they'd received. David presented the union's position. Cited precedent from the 1989 Peter Morales case. Quoted the exact contract language. Pointed out that the provision existed specifically to prevent this kind of situation. Mark reviewed everything, asked clarifying questions. Then he turned to Charlotte. Ms. Reed, did you provide Mr. Graham with specific instructions regarding where to obtain the coffee? I said to get coffee and pastries, but no specific vendor, no location, no budget constraints, she said. I expected him to use common sense. The arbitrator nodded, made a note. Turned to me. Mr. Graham, did you have any reason to believe Ms. Reed intended for you to spend 5 hours on this errand? She said it was an important meeting with directors. She emphasized making a good impression. She said, first impressions matter. I obtained what I judged to be the highest quality option available given those parameters. Another note. The arbitrator looked at both of us. The contract language is clear. Courier duties performed by classified personnel are compensable at double time rates. The assignment was made without parameters. The employee followed the assignment as given. The grievance is sustained. The award is $716 to be processed through standard payroll within 2 pay periods. Charlotte's face went white. Lisa from HR was already making notes. I would also recommend that department management establish clear protocols for any future non-standard duty assignments to avoid similar disputes. Meeting adjourned. David shook my hand outside the conference room. First sustained Article 7 grievance in 34 years. You're officially a legend. The fallout came faster than expected. Robert Hayes, the operations director who'd been in that conference room during the coffee incident, mentioned the situation during an executive meeting the following week. Described what he'd seen. The shouting. The contract dispute. The $700 coffee service. The way the directors had quietly enjoyed the excellent pastries while watching their colleague implode. Corporate launched a quiet review of Charlotte's department management. They found the fastener disaster. The project delays. The morale issues. The grievance. 6 complaints from other engineers about being used as personal assistants. Ethan's resignation letter citing toxic management. 2 months after the arbitration, Charlotte announced she was leaving Cascade to pursue other opportunities. Standard corporate language, but everyone knew what it meant. She'd been given the choice to resign gracefully or be managed out messily. Her last day was a Friday. She packed her office without saying goodbye to anyone. I watched her carry a box to her car around 4:30. She didn't look back. The following Monday felt different. Lighter. People actually smiled in the hallways. Someone brought donuts to the morning meeting. Noah made a joke about servant leadership and nobody flinched. The interim department head was Sarah Williams. 11 years with Cascade, worked her way up from quality control. Actually knew what a tolerance specification was. Actually understood why certain things mattered. First thing she did was call a department meeting. Not to talk about synergy or optimization. Just to ask what was broken and what we needed to fix it. People actually spoke up: the meeting schedule, the shared drive organization, the performance metrics, the approval layers. 2 hours later, we had a priority list and a plan. Second thing she did was have Thomas bring the espresso machine back from the storage closet in Annex B. "Welcome back," she said when we rolled it into place. Thomas made the first cup. Said it still worked perfectly, said he'd been maintaining it every week, just in case. Third thing Sarah did was reach out to Ethan, the junior engineer who'd quit. Asked if he'd consider coming back. Told him things had changed. He said he'd think about it. 3 months later, Sarah called me into her office. Corporate wants to make this permanent. Department head position. They're also adding a deputy role for technical oversight. I recommended you. Unanimous board approval. 15% raise. Reserved parking spot. I accept. She slid a paper across the desk. One condition. The coffee runs go through proper procurement channels. No more 4-hour road trips. Deal. 6 months later, the story got even better. Charlotte's fastener disaster? That $90,000 figure was conservative. One of our aerospace clients, a major defense contractor I can't name, launched a full supply chain audit after the incident. Standard procedure when a quality issue gets flagged. Usually, it's a formality. This time, it wasn't. The audit revealed that Charlotte had approved 3 other vendor changes during her brief tenure. All without proper engineering review. All to save money on unit costs. 2 of them created potential compliance issues with FAA certification standards. Nothing had failed yet. Nothing had caused an accident, but the potential was there. And in aerospace, potential is enough. The defense contractor paused their contract pending a full remediation review. That contract was worth $4.2 million annually. The remediation process took 3 months and cost another $600,000 in consultant fees, additional testing, and expedited recertification. Total damage from Charlotte's cost-cutting initiatives? Approximately $1.8 million. Noah found her on LinkedIn last month. She's at a consulting firm in Columbus now. Title: Strategic Operations Advisor. She posted an article about servant leadership and empowering teams through trust. Noah screenshot it and sent it to the group chat. 3 laughing emojis. The consulting firm called Cascade for a reference about 8 months after she started there. HR forwarded the call to Robert Hayes. His response apparently included phrases like significant compliance concerns and would not recommend for roles requiring technical judgment. Charlotte lasted another 4 months at the consulting firm. Her LinkedIn now says she's a freelance strategic advisor. Meanwhile, Sarah got promoted to VP of Operations. She asked me to take over as full department head. I said yes. Another raise, corner office. First thing I did was order a second espresso machine for the quality control team. They'd been jealous of ours for years. Second thing I did was reinstate the Tuesday morning engineering review. Full attendance, actual technical discussions. No buzzwords allowed. Third thing I did was call Redstone Roasters and set up a monthly delivery. Premium beans, company expense. Sarah approved it without hesitation. Said it was a morale investment. Fred from the motor pool stopped by last week. Said he was retiring at the end of the year. 32 years running fleet operations. Asked if I remembered the coffee. How could I forget? He grinned. Best requisition I ever approved. Still tell that story at family dinners. Sarah asked me to draft new guidelines for non-standard duty assignments. Simple policy: if a task falls outside an employee's job classification, it requires written authorization with specific parameters, budget limitations, and expected completion time. No ambiguity, no games. She approved it same day. Put it in the employee handbook. Final update, 1 year later. I got a call from Daniel Hayes last Tuesday, owner of Redstone Roasters. Said he'd been telling the story of the Cascade coffee run for months. His customers loved it. Turns out one of those customers was a regional business reporter for a Pittsburgh newspaper. She tracked me down through the company, asked if I'd do an interview about workplace dynamics and union contracts. The article ran last Sunday, the $716 coffee run, how one engineer used a union contract to push back against a bad boss. They interviewed me, David Sanchez, and Daniel Hayes. Even got a quote from Robert Hayes about what he witnessed in that conference room. The reporter did her research, found the Peter Morales precedent from 1989, talked to labor lawyers about the enforceability of union contracts, made it into a bigger story about workplace dignity and knowing your rights. The article got picked up by a few national outlets. Business Insider ran a summary. A labor rights blog did a follow-up piece. I started getting emails from engineers at other companies asking for advice on their own situations. Sent them all copies of their union contracts with the relevant sections highlighted. Told them to document everything. Noah framed a copy of the article and hung it in the break room. Right next to the espresso machine, someone added a sticky note underneath that said, "First impressions matter." Redstone Roasters sent us a care package last week. 3 pounds of their best beans, a handwritten note from Daniel, and a coffee mug that says, "First impressions matter." Daniel wrote that our story had brought them more business than any advertising campaign ever had. Said they were naming a blend after the incident. Called it the grievance roast. I put the mug on my desk. Use it every morning. What's the most ridiculous request a boss has ever made of you?